In this video, we'll be going over mounts that we should work to get now before patch 11.1 arrives. So we'll start the list off with the Regurgitated Mole. This mount has a 5.65% drop rate from the rare mob Lurker of the Deeps located in the Ringing Deeps, and is a no-brainer to get now if you don't have it already, especially since there are still people looking to do this. And what I meant by that is, since the rare requires a group to do, we should put this on our to-do list before Season 2 begins. So to start off, players need to pull all 5 levers across the Ringing Deeps at the same time in order for it to spawn. I'll be having a map showcasing all of the levers' coordinates, though take note that all levers have to be pulled almost at the exact same time, so you will need a party of 5 in order to pull this one off. See what I did? Yeah, okay. Once all 5 have been clicked successfully, an announcement will be seen on chat. As the earthen machinery turns, something begins to stir in the nearby lake, which will indicate that the rare is spawning. Thankfully, they didn't make the rare spawn right away, giving ample time for players who pulled levers across the map to arrive at the spawn location and tag the mob. And as a footnote, you don't have to be max level in order to get a chance of dropping the mount, and this can be done multiple times per warband since it's a daily loot lockout per character, so we can bring our alts to farm for this mount. The next mount up is going to be the Ivory Goliathus, which is rewarded from the achievement Glory of the Delver. Now we won't go into too much detail. Since we have an extensive guide covering this already, but for a TLDR, we'll basically be doing a ton of delves. Some of them will take more than once to do since they have certain conditions, while one of these sub-meta achievements for this requires us to do all of the variants of each delve in Khazalgar. So that means when the new Season 2 of the War Within Undermine arrives, there will be one additional variant for each of the delve, making that achievement take a lot more time to do. And as a footnote, the Nemesis sub-meta achievement is going to be a lot easier now than it will be when Season 2 arrives, since we'll not only have to defeat the current Nemesis, we also have to take out the new Season 2 Nemesis in order to finally get the mount. So definitely put this on your to-do list. The next mounts on this list are going to be the ones that came with the returning event, Plunderstorm. Since the next 5 mounts will only be around for 3 to 4 months, we should look to get these now. So what we'll want to do is head on over to the Plunderstorm game mode, then we'll see the Plunder Store feature right above. In here we have various cosmetics we can purchase, but over at the mounts tab we'll have the following mounts. So the first one is going to be the Silver Tide Stallion, sold for 1500 plunder. Now the following 4 mounts are all going to be sold at 5000 plunder, so keep that in mind. So the next one is going to be Hook Talon, as I said before, 5000 plunder. There's going to be the Royal Sea Feather and Polly Roger, and the last mount is going to be Plunder Lord's Midnight Crocolisk. Now for those looking to farm the currency, the easiest way to get these would just be to play. And it's also worth noting that every time we queue up for a game, we'll get one of these Captain's Quest, which will reward us 250 plunder upon completion, and it doesn't even matter if we win or lose. But generally, just by playing will give us a decent amount, even more so if we reach the final top 10, and a lot more if we win. Regardless of what captain orders we get, we'll want to focus on killing as many mobs as we can while looting every chest in the area, since they will also contribute to the amount of plunder that we get. And of course, if you're confident in taking on other players, then doing so will give us even more plunder. Now for the next set of mounts we'll go over in this list, they are going to be Timewalking related. And the first one we'll talk about is going to be the Timely Buzzbee. We'll be able to get this mount by doing Timewalking dungeons. The mount itself is tied to the achievement called Master of the Turbulent Timeways 2, which requires us to gain mastery of the timeways for 5 weeks during the event. Now for those who don't know how this works, during the Turbulent Timeways event, we'll have to simply do 4 Timewalking dungeons back to back to get the Mastery of Timeways buff, and we'll have to keep this buff active each week for 5 weeks in total to give us the achievement and the mount. Now remember, for each Timewalking dungeon that we do during the event, it will refresh that duration of the buff, but I'd suggest going at this mount attempt on an alt that we barely use. That way we just have to do the initial 4 Timewalking dungeons this week, and then we'll just have to come back next week and do 1 Timewalking dungeon in order to get credit each week. And with this method we'll be able to save time, since the buff only gets used or runs out when we're logged in on that character. Finally, there's a misconception that the time waste buff are removed when you die either in time walking dungeons or even just outside of the dungeons. This is not true. Now, there's also another method if you want to get this mount faster. I don't know if it's going to be patched this week or it's a bug not intended, but apparently there are people online who are able to get this achievement a lot faster if they run 5 separate alts or 4 separate alts doing 4 time walking dungeons for that week, and they will all have the mastery of the time waste buff. And once the week passes, they'll get credit for the achievement just by completing a single time walking dungeon, giving them the mount in basically 1 week. Since we're on the topic of time walking mounts, we're going to talk about the time walking event and what mounts the time walking vendors have to offer. So we want to keep this on our weekly to-do list, since if we're looking to collect all of the time walking mounts, it'll rotate every week, meaning it could take us quite a few months to get all of the time walking mounts. Currently, the time walking event is Legion, so we'll be able to get 3 mounts from the time walking vendor Ivory Goliathus here in Krasus Landing in Legion Dalaran. So we'll be able to get the Favor of the Valshara Hippogriff and the Flesh Ripper Brittle, which is a new mount for this expansion that was added just this patch 11.0.7. And the third mount we can purchase from this vendor is going to be the Sandy Shalewing, which is a mount awarded from the last time waste event, so we want to prioritize getting this since it'll be up for a limited time. After the Legion time walking event is done, it'll reset back to the Burning Crusade, and we'll go through each expansion once again with their own respective time walking vendors to purchase the mounts from. So we'll want to be actively participating in the time walking event so that we can farm these time warp badges to essentially get a mount from each of the expansion. Now, while on this grind, we'll also have a chance of getting our hands on the Infinite Time Reaver, which only drops from time walking dungeons and raids, and this will also be a personal loot roll. It's also worth mentioning though that this mount can also drop from the Quantum Courser, as is any time walking mount, and this is going to drop from Chronolore Dios. So if we're consistently participating, we have a chance to get more of the Quantum Courser and therefore a chance of getting a random time walking mount. The next mount up is going to be the Vitreous Stone Drake, which will drop from Slab Hide in the Stone Core dungeon. Now, the mobs are low level, so it won't do any harm to at least run this dungeon once a day, since it'll take literally 2 to 3 minutes to get the Slab Hide, and once that's done, we can just take the portal nearby to run out of the dungeon and change the difficulty, since we have a chance of getting the mount on both normal and heroic difficulty. Now, the mount will have a below 1% drop chance, but while we're doing the time walking event, this mount has a chance of dropping from the Quantum Courser I mentioned earlier, so at least we have an additional source to get this mount from. The next mount up is going to be the Seisbarg mount. To start with it, we'll first have to hunt down the rare Tkakata, which is found in Ashkahet. The respawn timer for this rare is quite long, so we could go about our daily activities in the zone, since we will be notified when it spawns by a message popping up saying the shadow of a hungering beast moves over the city. Now, once we hunt the rare and successfully take it down, we'll have a 64% chance to get the vial of that rare's blood, which is a quest starter. Now, do take note that in order for the item to drop, we will need to be at least level 78. If not, we're just locking ourselves out of a chance to get that vial, since the rare has a daily loot lockout per character, and with that in mind, we can bring our alts here to farm for this vial if we don't get it on the first try. Once we have the item, we'll turn it in over at the City of Threads and begin that quest line. From here on out, we'll be required to collect a bunch of stuff that drop from Nerubian mobs. A good area to farm the items will be doing the Arakara dungeon and fully clearing the mobs all the way up to the first boss, and once that's done, we'll just leave the dungeon and redo it all over again. Now, if you're doing this solo, you can just queue up for the follower dungeon. It works the same way, or if you got a good group, then you can just queue up for the Arakara specifically and do this grinding method. Now, this will cover all 3 items we'll need to collect from their respective quests. The first quest will require us to collect 1500 Nerubian Chitin, the second one needs us to get 1000 Nerubian Venom, and the last quest needs us to get 500 Nerubian Blood. And for this item, be a bit faster to farm with an LFG group, that is if you've got a good one and the zone isn't occupied by a farming group already. Once done, we'll turn in the quest and receive the mount. The next mount up is going to be the Diamond Mechsuit. Since Season 2 is arriving soon, we'll want to look to get this mount before it no longer becomes obtainable. The mount will be rewarded upon completing the achievement related to Mythic Plus, and to get this, we'll need to reach Mythic rating of at least 2000. As a general tip to go about this, I'd personally go for doing 6s, go for doing Mythic Plus 6 across the board. Granted, if we want to get this mount a lot quicker, higher Mythic Plus instances will make like this better, like 7s, 8s, or 9s. But if you're the type of person who'd go about this mount casually, then we can comfortably sit around Mythic +6, of course, as long as we're on time with finishing the dungeon, and the faster we do, the higher rating we'll get. The next mount up is going to be Beledar Spawn. The mount will drop from the rare Beledar Spawn found in Hollowfall, though you'll be in for a doozy since the rare has a server-based respawn timer, multiple potential spawn locations, and it's so easy to kill nowadays that it'll be dead the minute it's up. Aside from those red flags, the mount has a relatively high drop chance at 5%. It can be soloed for geared characters, and it's a daily loot lockout, meaning we can have multiple attempts at going for this mount. Now, as previously mentioned, the rare has a server-based respawn timer, and what that means is that it'll spawn an hour after the daily reset. And for those who don't know, 8 AM would be the daily reset for Pacific, 11 AM Eastern for the US servers, while for EU it'll be 8 AM. On top of that, upon spawning, the rare will be up for 30 minutes before it disappears and the cycle begins all over again, and it'll start its 3-hour cooldown. Now, it'll spawn every 3 hours during the darkness or night cycle, and of course the difficult part about this is finding out where it spawns exactly, since there are multiple spawn locations. Alternatively though, if you've spent time ranking up your renown level with the Hollowfall Arathi, we'll be able to purchase an item called Beledar's Attunement. The item itself will allow us to see the rare on our maps once it spawns, and this is war bound, so each of our characters will have this available. And with that in mind, we can bring our alt army to farm for this mount each day if we're looking to grind it out. Now, before we end the video, we wanted to cover some honorable mentions for mounts to get, and the first one is going to be Marrowfang. The mount itself will drop from the Mythic Necrotic Wake, so before this season ends, it is advisable to farm for this mount now. While on the topic of mounts to farm now, the next mounts up are going to be the Vicious Sky Flyer mount, which requires us to win rated PvP matches with a rating of 1000 or higher. Once we get this achievement, we'll be able to get both the Alliance and the Horde versions. Additionally, while farming PvP, we can even work on getting our hands on the item called the Vicious Saddle, which is given when we get 2400 points from PvP. With this item, we can turn them into one of the 20 vicious mounts, 10 for the Alliance and 10 for the Horde. And the good thing about these vicious mounts is that they'll always be available, so might as well while we're going for the Season 1 War Within Vicious mount. And for those who want to know how many points we get from doing PvP, winning rated battlegrounds give us 60 points, winning 3v3s give us 30, and winning 2v2s give us 10. And finally, for the last honorable mention mount, it's going to be the Forged Gladiator Spellbat, again another PvP mount. In order to get the mount, we'll have to win a total of 50 games while we're Gladiator ranked, which means we'll need our arena ranking to be at or above 2400. Keep in mind that it'll take quite a while to get to Gladiator ranking, but if you're one of the players who usually do arenas and enjoy it anyways, then might as well go for this mount while you're doing that grind. On the screen right now will be the ranking system for those who aren't familiar with it. But that's about it. That's all of the mounts we should get our hands on before the new patch update. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.